Elden Ring is the best game ever made. In this video, we'll discuss why Elden Ring is indeed the best game of all time and why you should not miss out on playing it, based on my completely unbiased and objective opinion that I am 100% sure viewers will agree with and will generate commentary only telling me how perfectly correct I am. In this video, we'll go through the atypical marketing cycle that fueled relentless hype for the game, its spectacularly successful launch, and the elements that make the game feel like magic: player agency, freedom, redefining immersion, and infinite build variety. If you want even more of this, check out our video that explains why Elden Ring succeeds where other games fail. This is the first of a series of videos exploring how many games have gotten impressively huge and committed fan bases, and what's great about each of them. If you hadn't noticed yet, the title is not serious. Elden Ring is a rather unique title, as it went through a very interesting development process and it created a few wrinkles in From Software's marketing plans due to unexpected but massive delays. This would normally cause the hype for a game to die down, but it had the opposite effect of fueling a rabid obsession among fans of Souls, leading to an incredible amount of hype at launch. Initially announced at E3 2019, Elden Ring was originally supposed to release in 2020 or 2021. Yet after the initial announcement, there was no Elden Ring at the Game Awards 2019, then silence for most of 2020 except for some tweets confirming the game was still in development, and no Elden Ring news at the Game Awards in 2020. By this point, it had been a year and a half since the game's announcement and the fanbase was losing touch with reality, to the point the subreddit had declared that period as the Great Hollowing. Fan desperation and memes about "ooh" and no news of Elden Ring became daily gags throughout May 2021, until finally there was a June 2021 Summer Game Fest trailer. But it would still be over 7 months before Elden Ring was finally released, at which point it had gone an unimaginable 992 days from announcement to release. That's over 32 months or over 2.5 years of fans just waiting. This may seem as normal for some long-standing series like The Elder Scrolls, Final Fantasy, or even The Witcher, but it's something that From Software and Namco don't typically do. Start the hype marketing only to completely stop and rip breadcrumbs of non-news until finally restarting the campaign 6 months before launch. By any previous standard, this campaign should have failed, yet it did not. Why? Obviously, the eagerness of dedicated Souls fans contributed immensely to sustaining interest, but in a strange way, the buildup of mystery and expectation in the absence of any proper information became enticing for non-Souls fans too. Articles began popping up about how the fanbase invented lore, theory-crafted non-existing builds, and laid out more and more hype built on dreams and hopes from very suspicious and sometimes obviously fake leaks and rumors. These articles attracted more views, which created more fake leakers, more hype memes, which created more articles, and it could all have come crashing down spectacularly had the launch not delivered. But as it's now the norm for From Software, it did. Once marketing was restarted, From Software went to their typical pattern of closed-door previews, gameplay reveals, network test, and pre-launch reviews. This is a very consumer-friendly method of advertisement as it gives plenty of information and even access to press, influencers, and players so that everyone can get a taste of the upcoming product. With this transparency as a backing, I wholeheartedly recommended pre-orders of Elden Ring, and I'm happy to look back and say I wasn't wrong. Elden Ring went on to sell 13 million copies by the end of March 2022, almost doubling that by March 2023 with 20 million copies, and is Bandai Namco's fastest-selling game of all time, and of course smashing records for From Software itself. The fact that the game has kept selling and is sustaining high concurrent players late into 2023, almost 2 years after launch and with little additional content, demonstrates the game's value, appeal, and longevity. But what is it that makes it so good? Let's discuss. Many have attempted to downplay the brilliance of Elden Ring by saying it's simply Dark Souls with a horse and more space. And while the core of that argument might be true, the implication that this is a bad thing is completely off base. And after all, the Dark Souls formula isn't really a formula, but rather the same artist using similar components to create thematic but clearly different experiences for the user. As I said in my review of the game, when I first heard of Elden Ring and saw the few screenshots and early footage, I thought it would be Dark Souls 4. When I first saw official Elden Ring gameplay last year, I thought it would be a take on open world like Dragon's Dogma but still Dark Souls. When I first played Elden Ring during the network test, I thought it would be less Souls and more about traversing large landscapes and popping into dungeons. 50 hours into the demo, I thought I knew the game's tempo and knew how the whole game would turn out. My first few hours with the full game have taught me otherwise. This is a game that will shatter your expectations and you can't even imagine the actual scale and depth of it. Every time you think you have it figured out, something new pops up around the corner to surprise you. What made Elden Ring so successful is that From Software correctly identified the best aspects of Souls and masterfully weaved them into a seamless open world, integrating innovation and new tricks in subtle but impactful ways. The melding of elements is so well done that it is indeed difficult to list out new features of Elden Ring versus the Souls series beyond the obvious, like a jump button. Everything that was added to the game was done with a precise touch and a careful measuring spoon to meld new and old concepts into one completely unique flavor. Dark Souls was an action RPG focused on combat and challenge, and the perseverance and dedication needed to overcome those challenges made your eventual success feel rewarding. So From Software was faced with the challenge of alluring a fanbase that loves to say, get good, to instead try a game that pretty much anyone can play and focuses instead on exploration and discovery. Of course, the first success in this was to create clever traps so that people may get an initial impression of difficulty that may not necessarily be so, such as the tree sentinel that roams your path right after the tutorial, the casual dragon that will melt you just a short ride from the start point, or the knight cavalry and deathbird mini-bosses in Limgrave. These are nothing but illusory walls, as they are avoidable encounters that can be done later when you've gotten more powerful, but they helped set the tone that the game had that challenge approach early on. From here, From Software had to then also convert the non-Souls fans who may have been intimidated by the difficult enemies. So they added guidance that points you away from danger and many options for exploration that would quickly distract anyone without putting them in danger, allowing them to gather gear and level up, which makes all encounters a lot easier. Thus, with a good foundation that allowed more casual players to continue while keeping the self-titled elite engaged, the next step was to fill out a world that would truly compel you to explore, so that you would seek out the challenging encounters because you want the loot hidden behind them. And it is here where I feel like From Software truly created something unique. I'm a huge fan of builds, tinkering, and character optimization, as you might be aware of if you're a fan of this channel. Many times I make builds just to see how they do against bosses and feel powerful, then restart my game or respec the character to try something else, without ever progressing. It's how we ended up with over 100 unique builds created by me that have been published on our wiki and channel. Being the sort of obsessive person that tries to make many builds in many different games and play them many different ways, I can say with confidence that Elden Ring delivers the most satisfying build experience in gaming. Yes, CRPG games like Pathfinder have a lot of classes and nuance, MMOs like Lost Ark or Elder Scrolls Online have huge amounts of customization via loot, and ARPGs like Path of Exile or Diablo have deep and ongoing metas that everyone loves. But Elden Ring gives an incredible amount of variety and uniqueness per build without needing to be meta or farmed, and it does it without the frequent bugs and issues of things not working correctly that are commonplace in other complex RPGs. The excellent balance of the game drove me to create a mock series where I explained how every weapon is the best weapon in Elden Ring, something that is only possible because the game is that well thought out, that you can truly make it through and feel powerful using nearly anything. Builds, of course, aren't just about weapons. In many games, they're about classes, but since Elden Ring classes are simply attributes and gear starting points, their classless system moves skills to a freeform choice where you can select the skill you like that matches your weapon's moveset and own playstyle. Then you add in talismans, spells, buffs, and consumables to end up with thousands of unique combinations. And the important thing is that they work. You can play the game with them, you're not helplessly gimping yourself if you want to stick to A or B. Of course, some builds are more powerful than others, and there are certain metas for PvP that are quickly found and abused. But given From Software has now deployed separate balancing for PvP and PvE, solo players can really devote themselves to creativity and enjoy the combat in multiple unique styles. The build variety is the most appealing to me, but the reality is that Elden Ring's interpretation of player agency and freedom redefined what immersive means, and it's a huge factor in its success. Many games approach immersion as a need for high-end graphics, a minimalist UI, realistic physics, and events. Many fall into the trap of becoming an interactive movie, where you are immersed into the events but have little control over them. Elden Ring gifted us instead with a world as a playground where rather than feeling like you're playing a game, you feel like you're playing a world. Like if you'd wandered into a book, each corner hides unique vistas, secret lore, hidden valuables, and unexpected enemies. It successfully delivers that excitement and intrigue that tabletop RPGs have always been lauded for, giving a feeling of freedom to explore, interact, attack, or retreat. This approach is reinforced further by the multiple protagonist narrative, where you as the player character aren't the main protagonist, and will find NPCs don't exist just for your purposes, and some will act and move of their own accord based on their actions and objectives, regardless of whether you stop to talk to them. This of course leads to the player missing out on steps for multiple quest lines, which can be a frequent complaint, but it is a powerful tool when it comes to making you aware that the world does not revolve around you. Taking all the individual components of Elden Ring, one could easily think that there's little new or innovative in the mix. Yet somehow the combination resulted in a magical experience. The reason for this is, as I said earlier, the careful consideration and use of each as expected. The nuanced layering of mechanics so that players would not be overwhelmed, but rather thrilled to discover something new. The scale of the map, exploration and hidden spaces that aren't locked behind tools or events, but rather your own observation and creativity. It's been almost 2 years since the launch of the game, as I mentioned earlier, and I still lose myself in the quiet tunes of Limgrave, and I still see people discovering small things here or there, tying up lore notes or perfecting our understanding of how specific effects work, or even charting every boss movement into complex graphs. The passion the game has generated among the fanbase has not dampened, and now with the announcement of the Shadow of the Erdtree expansion, we have arrived at yet another cycle of waiting for more news. First revealed in February of this year, most don't expect it to be out until February 2024, which is a year after its official introduction. But the lack of news and updates has many thinking that the expansion may be even further down into 2024, meaning yet many months of expectation buildups. Will the Elden Ring DLC deliver this magic once again? Can From Software surprise us again in this same world? I have complete confidence that yes, they can. For the past 15 years, yes, 15 years, release after release of From Software games have successfully delivered a unique and compelling gaming experience. I fell in love with Demon's Souls, I was seduced again with Dark Souls, and I was completely blown away by Bloodborne, and then again by the tempo pace of Sekiro, and finally I was left in awe at Elden Ring. For that, I'm happy to say that it's the best game ever made. So what do you guys think? What do you guys think of our new series? Is Elden Ring your favorite game of all time, or maybe just right now? What other titles would you like us to cover in this series, and why? Let us know in the comments below.